I've always believed that success in life is built on a solid foundation of trust and loyalty. As the owner of a thriving construction company, I've spent years laying the groundwork for my business, brick by brick, much like the homes I build for families. My company, Rich Build, has flourished, becoming one of the top names in the industry. We're known for our quality and integrity, values that I've instilled in every employee. And yet, amidst the busy workdays and the deals I closed, there was one structure in my life I valued above all: my marriage to Alice. Alice and I met in college, where her bright smile and infectious laughter caught my attention immediately. From our first date, I knew she was the one. We balanced each other perfectly. I was the ambitious dreamer, and she was the steady support, always encouraging me to reach for the stars. We married shortly after graduation, and from that moment, my life took on a new meaning. We built a life together, filled with laughter, love, and trust. I thought we were an indestructible team. Every morning, I would wake up to the smell of coffee brewing and Alice humming a tune in the kitchen. She had this way of making the simplest moments feel extraordinary. We shared countless dreams, from traveling the world to one day owning our own beach house. I often marveled at how lucky I was to have her by my side, managing the household while I dedicated myself to my career. I trusted her completely. I believed in her unwavering loyalty. Our home was a testament to our life together. We had chosen every piece of furniture and decor, each telling a story of our journey. The walls were adorned with pictures capturing our happiest moments, our wedding day, vacations, and milestones. I often thought about how many couples would envy what we had. I was the proud husband who never doubted the love and commitment we shared. At work, I was respected by my peers and feared by my competitors. My reputation as a diligent, ethical businessman preceded me. I poured my heart and soul into every project, striving for perfection. I remember the late nights spent drafting plans, the early mornings inspecting sites, and the exhilaration of handing over keys to satisfied clients. Each successful project felt like another building block in the life Alice and I were constructing together. I felt invincible, but it was during those moments of reflection, as I sat in my office overlooking the bustling city, that I realized how intertwined our lives had become. I often thought about how I couldn't wait to share my successes with Alice. Her opinion mattered more to me than anyone else's. We would often discuss my projects over dinner, her eyes sparkling with pride and interest. I was convinced that our bond could weather any storm. However, as the saying goes, you never truly know what lies beneath the surface. I was so blinded by my trust and contentment that I failed to notice the subtle changes in Alice's behavior. Little things began to slip through the cracks. The late nights at the office that turned into dinners out with friends, the unexplained phone calls that she quickly dismissed. Each time, I shrugged it off, convinced that my love for her would shield us from any trouble. I couldn't fathom the idea of betrayal. It felt impossible. The truth is, I had built my life on the assumption that our relationship was unbreakable. I often told myself that as long as I remained devoted and hardworking, nothing could shake our foundation. But as I continued to climb higher in my career, I unwittingly allowed cracks to form in the very thing I cherished most, my marriage. I had built walls around my heart, believing that the structure of trust we had created would keep any storm at bay. In hindsight, I should have known that sometimes the most beautiful facades can hide the darkest secrets. And yet, at that moment, I was still blissfully unaware, holding on to the belief that our love was impervious to the trials of life. As I walked through the doors of my office that day, I had no idea that my life was about to take a turn I could never have predicted. The revelation of Alice's betrayal loomed on the horizon, waiting to shatter my carefully constructed world. The days turned into weeks, and I began to sense an unsettling shift in our once harmonious life. It started with the smallest of changes, the kind that, in hindsight, should have set off alarm bells. I remember the first time Alice came home late from work. She breezed in, her hair tousled and a hint of anxiety in her eyes, laughing it off as a hectic day at the office. I wanted to believe her. After all, we both led busy lives, and the construction industry could be unforgiving. But then the late nights became a pattern. I'd find myself sitting at the dining table, staring at the empty chair across from me, the remnants of dinner cooling on my plate. Alice would text me, saying she was caught up with a project or out with colleagues. As I scrolled through my phone, the familiar pang of unease tightened in my stomach. I would reassure myself, reminding myself that I was a rational man, a builder who focused on facts and logic. I couldn't let my mind wander to dark places. It wasn't just the late nights, there were subtle shifts in her demeanor that didn't escape my notice. Alice had always been open and communicative, but now she was elusive. When I asked about her day, she'd offer vague answers, deflecting my curiosity with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She started guarding her phone like a precious secret. The once casual sharing of messages transformed into glances and hurried swipes, and I began to feel a growing chasm between us. One evening, as I was cleaning up after dinner, I noticed her phone buzzing on the kitchen counter. A message popped up, but before I could read it, she rushed in, snatching it away with an urgency that sent chills down my spine. "Just a work thing," she said, her tone too bright, too rehearsed. My heart raced as the gnawing suspicion took root in my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. The following week, things escalated. I found myself obsessively watching for signs, replaying every interaction in my head. I began to notice Alice's patterns, her workouts that were stretching longer than usual, the way she'd dress up more often, and the unfamiliar scent of perfume lingering in the air when she returned home. Each detail became a piece of the puzzle, and I couldn't ignore the sinking feeling that they painted a troubling picture. That Friday, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I needed to confront the truth, whatever it might be. After work, I took a deep breath and went to the office of Rich Build. Instead of heading straight home, I waited for Alice's usual departure time, convinced that following her would reveal the answers I sought. It felt wrong, like I was crossing a line, but my curiosity and fear overruled my better judgment. As the clock ticked toward 6, I saw her getting into her car. I followed at a safe distance, my heart pounding in my chest. She drove through the familiar streets. And soon, I found myself parked outside a trendy restaurant known for its upscale dining. My stomach twisted as I watched her enter the establishment. Was this where she had been spending her evenings? I sat in my car, nerves frayed, as I weighed my options. I could call her and confront her right now, but the thought terrified me. Instead, I decided to wait, hoping to see who she was with. It wasn't long before I noticed a familiar figure stepping out of the restaurant, Nick. My heart dropped. Nick was my competitor, a man I had always regarded with a mix of admiration and rivalry in the construction business. I had never imagined he would be intertwined in my personal life, let alone with my wife. The two of them shared a laugh as they exited the restaurant, and my breath caught in my throat. I watched as they walked to her car, their chemistry undeniable. It was as if time had stopped, and every heartbeat echoed with the weight of betrayal. I couldn't move, frozen in disbelief. Anger surging through me like a tidal wave. I had been right to be suspicious. As they got into her car, I felt my resolve harden. I had to know for certain what was happening. I grabbed my phone, pretending to check messages while discreetly snapping a photo of them. The click of the camera felt like a gunshot in the silence of my realization. I needed evidence, something to hold onto when the inevitable confrontation came. When they finally drove away, I followed at a distance. My mind raced, piecing together the fragments of my life that were crumbling before me. I thought of all the dreams Alice and I had shared, the life we had built together. It felt like everything I valued was slipping through my fingers, but I couldn't allow myself to break down. I needed to be strong, to prepare for the fight ahead. Later that night, as I lay in bed beside Alice, the space between us felt insurmountable. She slept peacefully, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing inside me. I stared at the ceiling, replaying the evening's events in my mind. The photo of her and Nick burned in my pocket, a stark reminder of the truth I now carried. It was time to face the reality of my marriage and the betrayal that had woven itself into the fabric of our lives. I had trusted her, and now, that trust had become a weapon against me. In the coming days, I would gather my strength and confront Alice with the evidence I had discovered. This was just the beginning, and I knew that the path ahead would lead to a reckoning neither of us could avoid. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across our living room. I paced back and forth, my heart pounding in my chest like a war drum, each beat echoing the turmoil raging within me. The evidence of Alice's betrayal burned in my pocket, a constant reminder of the storm that was about to break. I could feel the weight of the world pressing down on me, and I knew I couldn't delay the confrontation any longer. When Alice walked through the door, her laughter rang out, a sound I had once cherished but now felt like a taunt. She seemed blissfully unaware of the turmoil brewing just beneath the surface. I caught a glimpse of her radiant smile, but it did nothing to ease the tempest of emotions swirling inside me. My heart raced as I thought of all the lies that had woven themselves into our lives. "Hey, honey, how was your day?" she asked, her voice cheerful, yet I could sense a hint of tension in the air. "Can we talk?" I replied, my voice steady but heavy with the gravity of the moment. I gestured toward the living room, where the shadows seemed to grow darker, mirroring the heaviness in my heart. She frowned, her smile fading as she stepped into the room. "Sure, what's on your mind?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "It's about Nick," I said, the name hanging in the air like a noose tightening around my throat. The moment I uttered his name, I saw her posture shift, her defenses rising like a wall. "What about him?" she replied, her voice steady but guarded. "I know you've been seeing him," I said, my voice gaining strength as I continued. "I followed you the other night. I saw you together." I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking slightly, and showed her the photo I had taken. The image of her laughing with him felt like a knife twisting in my gut. For a moment, silence enveloped us. I watched her face pale, her eyes widening as the truth settled between us. But instead of denying it, she took a deep breath and straightened her back, an expression of resignation crossing her face. "Richard, you don't need to say anything," I interrupted, my voice rising as anger surged through me. "I've seen enough. How could you do this to me? To us?" The betrayal felt like a physical blow, leaving me reeling as I struggled to process the reality of what she had done. Alice's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but she held her ground. "I never meant for it to happen," she said softly. "Things just evolved. Nick was there when I needed someone to talk to. It was never supposed to be like this." Never supposed to be like this? I echoed incredulously, my heart racing. "You think that makes it any better? You crossed a line, Alice. You went behind my back with my competitor, with the man who's been trying to take everything I've built." The words tumbled out in a rush, each one a reminder of the pain I felt. She stepped closer, her voice trembling. "Richard, I was lonely. You were so busy with work, and I felt invisible. I didn't want this to happen. I thought I could handle it. But it spiraled out of control." "Lonely?" I shot back, my frustration boiling over. "You had everything. I worked hard to give you a life most people only dream of. I trusted you with my heart, my life. And this is how you repay me?" The betrayal felt like a chasm opening between us, and I was standing at the edge, staring into the abyss. Alice's eyes filled with tears as she reached out to me, her voice desperate. "Please, Richard, don't do this. I love you. I made a mistake, but I want to fix it. I want to make things right." "Make things right?" I couldn't help but laugh bitterly, the sound echoing in the tense silence. "How can you even say that? You've shattered everything we built together. You think you can just say you're sorry and expect me to forget?" The tension hung heavy in the air, and I could see the weight of her guilt and regret pressing down on her. But the anger within me was too raw, too powerful to ignore. I turned away, needing space to breathe, to think. "I can't believe this is happening," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I need time to process everything. I thought I knew you, but now, I don't even know who you are anymore." The realization cut deeper than I could have imagined, and I felt a tear slip down my cheek. "I'll do whatever it takes to earn your trust back," Alice pleaded, her voice breaking. "Please don't walk away from us. I'll end things with Nick. I swear." Her words felt hollow like promises whispered into the void. I turned back to face her, my expression hardening. "You've already broken that trust. How can I believe you now? I don't know if I can ever forgive you for this." As I spoke those words, I felt a sense of finality wash over me. This wasn't just a momentary fight, this was the beginning of something darker. I had to act, to regain control of my life, and I realized that the path ahead would not be one of reconciliation. It was time to prepare for the consequences of her betrayal. With one last look at the woman I had once loved, I turned away, the echoes of our confrontation still ringing in my ears. I had been broken, but I was determined to rise from the ashes of my shattered trust. The game had changed, and I was no longer just a builder of homes. I was about to become the architect of my revenge. The days following the confrontation with Alice felt surreal, like I was living in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I moved through the motions of my daily life, my mind a whirlwind of anger and betrayal. Each time I walked past our framed photos or stepped into our bedroom, Memories of happier times crashed over me like a tidal wave. But amidst the pain, a cold clarity began to take shape. I wasn't going to let this betrayal define me. Instead, I would take control and ensure that both Alice and Nick faced the consequences of their actions. In the depths of my fury, a plan began to crystallize in my mind. I had spent years in the construction industry, honing my skills and building a network of connections. It was time to use that knowledge to orchestrate a plan that would bring Nick down and leave him with nothing. I wanted him to feel the crushing weight of betrayal that I had experienced. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this was about more than just revenge. It was about reclaiming my power. I started mapping out the logistics of my scheme. Nick had always been ambitious, often boasting about his upcoming projects and plans to expand his business. I decided to exploit that ambition. My idea was to create a false deal that would lure him in, promising a massive payout and a chance to outshine his competitors. It would be a deal so enticing that he would jump at the chance without questioning it. I called in favors from my trusted contacts in the industry. I reached out to my suppliers, subcontractors, and even a few architects I had worked with over the years. I crafted a story about a lucrative project, a high-end residential development that was sure to attract attention and bring in substantial profits. I painted a vivid picture of the project's potential, complete with phony blueprints and fabricated investor interest. I scheduled a meeting with Nick, making sure to present myself as calm and collected, the epitome of professionalism. I wanted him to see me as a rival worth listening to, not just some broken man whose life had fallen apart. I practiced my pitch, refining every detail until I felt confident that I could sell him on the deal without raising any suspicion. When the day arrived, I dressed meticulously, donning a tailored suit that commanded respect. I arrived at the meeting location, a chic cafe downtown, early to ensure that I could set the stage for our conversation. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the air as I sat at a table near the window, waiting for Nick to arrive. My heart raced with anticipation, a blend of excitement and apprehension coursing through my veins. When Nick finally walked in, he was all smiles, exuding an air of confidence that grated on my nerves. I forced a smile in return, extending my hand as he approached. "Richard, good to see you, man," he said, slapping me on the back. "What's this I hear about a new project?" Thanks for meeting me," I replied, gesturing for him to sit down. "I think you're going to be very interested in what I have to share." As I launched into my carefully crafted pitch, I watched Nick's expression shift from curiosity to excitement. I could see the wheels turning in his mind, the ambition glimmering in his eyes as I laid out the details of the project. I spoke of prime real estate, high-end finishes, and the potential for a lucrative return on investment. Every detail I shared was designed to make him salivate, to draw him deeper into the trap I was setting. "Honestly, this sounds incredible," he said, leaning in, his enthusiasm palpable. "What do you need from me?" I could feel the rush of adrenaline coursing through me as I presented the next part of my plan. "I need a partner willing to invest in the initial phases. I have the connections to get this off the ground, but I need someone like you to make it happen." I carefully articulated the financial breakdown, presenting numbers that would make the deal appear not just plausible but irresistible. "Count me in," he exclaimed, his excitement infectious. I had him hook, line, and sinker. As we continued to discuss the details, I could see him envisioning the success of the project, completely oblivious to the fact that I was leading him straight into a financial trap. With each passing minute, I could sense the walls closing in around him. I emphasized the importance of quick action, feeding his urgency and desire to be at the forefront of this opportunity. "The market is heating up, and we need to act fast," I urged, "before someone else swoops in and steals the opportunity from us." Nick's competitive nature fueled his eagerness, and I knew I had crafted a perfect illusion. I could almost taste the bitterness of victory as I watched him, caught up in the excitement of my deception. As we sealed the deal, exchanging emails and contact information, I felt a thrill run through me. This was just the beginning. When I left the cafe, I felt a mix of exhilaration and trepidation. I had set the wheels of my revenge in motion, and there was no turning back. I knew Nick would pour his resources into this false venture, driven by the allure of success and the promise of a bright future. He would soon realize, however, that the foundation I had built for him was nothing more than a facade, destined to crumble beneath the weight of his ambition. As I walked down the bustling streets, I felt the tension easing from my shoulders. I was no longer the victim, I was the architect of my fate. And I was determined to see this plan through to the end. Nick and Alice had taken so much from me, but now it was my turn to reclaim my power and watch as their world came crashing down around them. The game was on, and I was ready to play. As the days turned into weeks, my carefully orchestrated plan began to unfold, and I watched with a mix of satisfaction and anticipation as Nick dove headfirst into the false deal I had constructed. It was like watching a puppet dance on strings, completely unaware of the hands that were guiding its every move. Each time my phone buzzed with another update from him, I felt a rush of adrenaline, a confirmation that I was successfully manipulating the situation. Nick was relentless in his pursuit of success. He quickly mobilized his resources, calling in favors from his network of contractors and investors. I had painted a picture of a groundbreaking project that was going to transform the neighborhood, and it wasn't long before he was rallying everyone he knew to invest in what he believed to be a goldmine. With every meeting and phone call he made, he fell deeper into my trap, and I felt a sense of grim satisfaction knowing that I was the one orchestrating it all. One afternoon, as I sat in my office, I received a text from Nick. "Richard, I just secured a meeting with some major investors. They're excited about the project and want to discuss potential financing. This is happening." His enthusiasm was palpable, and I could almost hear the excitement in his voice, even through the screen. I couldn't help but smirk. The more invested he became, the closer I was to my goal. "Great work, Nick," I replied, keeping my tone light and encouraging. "This is exactly what we need to push the project forward. Let's meet later to discuss the details." I wanted him to feel supported, and to think I was his ally in this endeavor. In reality, I was just tightening the noose around his neck. As he began pouring money into the project, I ensured that everything I presented to him seemed legitimate. I sent him updates on the progress of the development, complete with fabricated documents and faux blueprints that looked convincingly real. I even had a few contacts of mine send emails posing as enthusiastic investors, expressing their eagerness to get involved. Each piece of fabricated evidence bolstered Nick's confidence, making it easier for him to rationalize his growing investment in the venture. One evening, Nick invited me to join him for a meeting with the investors he had secured. As we sat around the polished conference table, surrounded by well-dressed individuals eager to discuss financing, I felt an electric thrill run through me. The room buzzed with ambition and the promise of wealth, and I found myself relishing the role I played in this charade. "Gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to my partner, Richard," Nick said, beaming with pride. "He's the mastermind behind this project." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to appear confident as I introduced myself to the group. The air was thick with anticipation, and I could feel their eyes on me, assessing my every word. "Thank you for having me," I began, laying on the charm. "I believe this project has the potential to change the landscape of this neighborhood, and with your support, we can make it happen." As I spoke, I made sure to present a compelling vision, weaving in statistics and projected growth rates that painted a picture of unparalleled success. I could see Nick nodding along, the excitement in his eyes urging me on. I was in control, and every ounce of my training as a builder came rushing back as I crafted a narrative that seemed both plausible and lucrative. After the meeting, Nick was positively glowing. "Did you see the way they reacted? They're in. We just need to finalize the paperwork, and we'll be off to the races." He could barely contain his enthusiasm, and I felt a surge of satisfaction knowing that his trust in me was only growing. As the days turned into a blur of meetings, paperwork, and planning, Nick's investments continued to escalate. He was enthusiastic, pouring resources into the project, unaware of the reality of what he was getting himself into. Each decision he made further ensnared him in the web I had woven, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of dark delight as I watched him make choices that would ultimately lead to his downfall. I made sure to maintain constant communication, feeding him the information he craved and ensuring he felt secure in his investments. "Let's push forward with the contractor selections and finalize the designs," I would suggest, always steering the conversation toward actions that would deepen his commitment. The more he invested, both financially and emotionally, the more tightly bound he became to the project, and me. Behind the scenes, however, I was quietly sabotaging everything. I created obstacles that would lead to delays, pushing him to increase his investment further to keep up with the supposed timelines. I arranged for inflated quotes from contractors and engineered hurdles that would make the project seem more challenging than it truly was, all while keeping the illusion of progress alive. By the time I reached out to my network to prepare for the impending fallout, Nick was completely ensnared. I felt like a puppeteer pulling the strings of a performance, and I relished every moment. He had become the embodiment of ambition, blinded by the dream of success while I held the power to shatter it all. As I sat alone in my office late one evening, staring out at the city lights, I felt a mixture of anticipation and dread. The culmination of my plan was approaching, and I knew the fallout would be explosive. I had crafted a masterful trap, one that would not only ruin Nick but would also leave a scar on Alice's heart. She had chosen him, and soon she would see the consequences of that choice. It was time to set the final stage in motion. The deal was in action, and I was prepared to pull the rug out from under them both. In my quest for revenge, I had found a purpose, and now I was ready to unleash the storm that would bring their world crashing down. The moment of reckoning had arrived, and I felt a mix of exhilaration and dread as I prepared to set my plan into motion. I had watched Nick pour his resources into what he believed was a lucrative venture, but now it was time to ensure that all of his investments would lead to nothing but failure. I knew that executing the final pieces of my plan would require finesse and cunning. And I was ready to pull the strings to orchestrate his downfall. As the project progressed, I began laying the groundwork for the collapse. I had already planted seeds of doubt within the contractors, suggesting that the project was mired in complications and delays. I fed them misinformation about zoning issues, permits, and inspections, all designed to make the situation appear far more dire than it was. Meanwhile, I worked to ensure that Nick remained blissfully unaware of the impending disaster. The first major step in my plan involved manipulating the legal framework surrounding the deal. I had previously consulted with a legal expert under the pretense of ensuring everything was above board for the investors. I learned how to exploit loopholes in the contracts, setting up conditions that would make it nearly impossible for Nick to salvage the situation if anything went wrong. I crafted clauses that appeared innocuous but would leave him vulnerable to significant financial losses if certain conditions weren't met. One of the critical pieces of my strategy was a fabricated clause regarding the completion timeline of the project. I ensured that the language was vague yet binding, creating the perfect storm for complications. It stipulated that if the project was not completed within a set timeframe due to any delays, regardless of their nature, Nick would be liable for additional costs and penalties. It was a trap that would eventually ensnare him, as I watched him remain confident, moving forward with his plans. I orchestrated a series of events that would serve as the final nail in the coffin. I staged a surprise inspection of the site by the city's building department, which I had arranged through my contacts. The inspector, briefed by me on the serious issues that had emerged, cited multiple violations that would halt the project dead in its tracks. The report would trigger a chain reaction of bureaucratic delays, all while pushing Nick closer to the brink. The day of the inspection arrived, and I feigned ignorance as Nick called me, sounding frantic. "Richard, you won't believe this. The city is saying we have to halt work because of a bunch of violations. They claim it's due to incomplete permits. Are you sure it's not something we can resolve?" I replied, masking my glee. "Maybe we should consult with our legal team." "Oh, I'm on it," he said, his voice filled with tension. "But if this doesn't get sorted, I'm going to be facing major penalties." "This isn't good, Richard." I could practically hear the panic in his voice, and it thrilled me to know that I was inching closer to my goal. Over the next few days, I accelerated the damage. I coordinated with the contractors to further delay the project, sowing discord among them by planting seeds of distrust. "Did you hear what Nick is doing?" I'd casually mention it to a contractor. "He's cutting corners to save costs. I wouldn't want to work for someone like that." With each passing moment, I watched Nick spiral deeper into chaos. The combination of mounting legal issues, contractor disputes, and financial strain began to suffocate him. I even leaked false rumors to the local construction community about his mismanagement of funds, effectively tarnishing his reputation in the industry. As the project fell apart at the seams, the repercussions for Nick were swift and brutal. Investors began to pull out, nervous about their financial stakes in a venture that seemed doomed from the start. I could almost taste the bitterness of his impending downfall as he reached out to me. His voice tinged with desperation. Richard, I'm in deep trouble. I've been trying to reassure everyone, but this is spiraling out of control. I don't know how to fix this. I feigned concern, playing the supportive friend. We'll figure something out, Nick. Let's meet and go over the numbers together. Maybe we can salvage this. I knew there was no saving him. I was merely letting him hang on a little longer while the noose tightened around his neck. The reality hit him hard when he received the official notice from his board of directors. They were terminating his position. The message was blunt and unyielding, due to the ongoing issues with the development project and a significant loss of investor confidence. We have no choice but to terminate your employment effective immediately. The blow was crushing, and I could sense his despair as he reached out again, his tone heavy with defeat. I've lost everything, Richard. My job, my reputation. What am I going to do? My heart raced with a mix of triumph and pity, emotions colliding as I realized the full impact of what I had orchestrated. He had been so blind to my manipulation, and now he was paying the price. I'm here for you, man. We'll get through this together. But we need to act fast to contain the damage. Over the following weeks, as Nick's financial situation grew increasingly dire, he was forced to sell off assets just to stay afloat. The once promising contractor who had been on the rise now faced bankruptcy, struggling to salvage what little remained of his business. With every sale, I watched the life drain from his ambitions. The fire in his eyes extinguished by the weight of his failures. As he wrestled with the collapse of his dreams, I realized that this wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was about the stark reality of consequences. I had set out to destroy him, and I was watching it unfold right before my eyes. The moment of satisfaction was bittersweet, and as I sat in my office, the gravity of what I had done settled over me like a shroud. I knew I had won, but at what cost? In my quest for vengeance, I had created a chain reaction of destruction that had not only obliterated Nick's career but had also seeped into my own life, dragging me further into a realm of darkness I hadn't anticipated. I was victorious, but the taste of victory was tainted by the realization that I had become something I had never wanted to be, a destroyer. As Nick faced the impending reality of bankruptcy, the reality of my actions began to weigh heavily on me. I had dismantled his life piece by piece, but in doing so, I had also begun to dismantle my humanity. The victory felt hollow, and I was left wondering if I could ever truly escape the shadows of my own making. The news hit Alice like a freight train, leaving her stunned and disoriented. Just days before, she had been riding the high of her affair with Nick, relishing the thrill of their secret rendezvous and the excitement he brought into her life. But now, as she sat alone in their once vibrant home, the walls felt like they were closing in around her. The silence was deafening, a stark contrast to the laughter and chatter that had once filled their space. She had received the call from Nick's office, a cold and unyielding voice delivering the grim news: Mr. Reynolds is no longer with the company. Due to unforeseen circumstances, he has been terminated effective immediately. Alice's heart sank as the realization began to sink in. Nick was gone, and with him, the stability and excitement she had come to depend on. Desperate to understand what had happened, she tried calling him, but her calls went straight to voicemail. Panic set in as she began to piece together the chaos surrounding the construction project. Friends and acquaintances had whispered about the disaster, but she had been blissfully unaware, caught up in the allure of their affair. Now, with Nick's exit from the business, her world felt like it was crumbling to dust. The financial support she had relied upon was evaporating. Alice had been living in a bubble of luxury, but now that bubble had burst. Her finances were precarious, tied directly to Nick's success. Without him, she faced mounting bills and an uncertain future. She realized with dawning horror that she had placed all her trust in him, only to be left with nothing but empty promises. As the days passed, the reality of her situation grew increasingly bleak. Friends who had once celebrated her relationship with Nick now distanced themselves, unsure how to navigate the fallout of his scandal. The whispers grew louder, and Alice found herself isolated, trapped in a situation of her own making. She had sacrificed her independence for the thrill of being with someone else's partner, and now she was paying the price. She frantically tried to reach out to Nick, hoping he would reappear and help her out of this mess. But deep down, she knew he had been backed into a corner, too. The once charismatic man who had swept her off her feet was now just a memory, and the lavish lifestyle he had promised felt like a cruel joke. With no support and dwindling resources, Alice was forced to confront her reality. The life she had envisioned with Nick, filled with promise and excitement, was nothing more than a mirage. She was left with a crushing sense of loss, not only of Nick but of the stability she had taken for granted. To regain control, Alice began seeking work, but her lack of experience and the stigma of her connection to Nick made it difficult. Every application felt like a reminder of her failure, and the weight of shame pressed heavily upon her shoulders. She had lost the man she thought could elevate her life, only to discover that her worth had been diminished in the process. As I sat in my office, reflecting on the devastation I had orchestrated, I felt a complex mix of emotions wash over me. The initial satisfaction of revenge had faded, replaced by a hollow sense of emptiness. I had succeeded in dismantling Nick's life, and in the process, I had shattered Alice's world as well. But what had I truly gained from this twisted victory? I had envisioned a sense of triumph, a feeling of justice for the betrayal I had endured, yet all I felt was a profound emptiness. I had been so consumed by my desire for vengeance that I hadn't stopped to consider the aftermath. Yes, I had succeeded in my plan, but at what cost? I had destroyed not just Nick, but also the life Alice had built around him. In seeking to reclaim my dignity, I had lost sight of the man I used to be. The satisfaction of revenge felt fleeting, a momentary high that quickly crumbled into despair. I realized that I was still left with the remnants of my shattered trust, my broken marriage, and a lingering sense of disillusionment. Vengeance hadn't returned my life to its former glory, it had only left me with the stark reality of my choices. Now, I stood at a crossroads, faced with the task of rebuilding my life from the ground up. I had to confront the consequences of my actions, not only for myself but for the people I had hurt along the way. I knew I had to make amends, not just for Nick and Alice, but for the values I had abandoned in my pursuit of revenge. The road ahead was daunting, but I understood that this was my chance to start anew. I needed to redefine what success meant to me, to forge a path built on integrity and respect rather than destruction. It wouldn't be easy, and I knew the scars of my past would linger, but I was determined to take the first steps toward redemption. As I looked out at the cityscape from my office window, I felt a flicker of hope amidst the darkness. I was ready to let go of the bitterness that had consumed me and embrace the possibility of a brighter future. I would rise from the ashes of my past, not as a man driven by revenge but as someone seeking to rebuild and restore the life I had nearly lost forever. The journey ahead would require strength and resilience, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of purpose beginning to take root.